Hey, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Connection Loop podcast. I am Rob. This is the podcast that's all about talking with sales leaders, entrepreneurs, and business leaders about their strategies, their experiences, and these conversations we find enlightening, entertaining, and we hope that you'll learn a lot from them. Today, we have Dana here, who's going to introduce himself in a little bit. He's the VP at Anaplan, and he's going to tell us a little bit about himself, and then we're going to have a lively back and forth about sales strategy and everything related to that. Dana, welcome in.
Thank you, Rob. Thanks for having me. I really appreciate it. My name is Dana Therrien. I've been in sales, revenue operations for most of my career. I'm sad to say that's been longer than 25 years. I started my career as a military officer in the finance corps. I had an opportunity to serve at NATO headquarters and the Pentagon, some pretty cool experiences there. And it just translated into a strategy and operations focus inside of sales. That's where I really enjoy spending my time. I saw a lot of parallels between what I experienced in the military and deploying sales resources across the world in the most effective way you possibly can. So the strategy and planning piece of it, I really liked. And that's when I got into sales and revenue operations and led that function for lots of different companies for many years. And then eventually landed at a company called Serious Decisions, which was acquired by Forrester. And I led a research and advisory practice helping other companies improve in those areas and also focusing on sales performance management vendors like Anaplan. And as I was leaving there, I came to Anaplan because it's a strategy and planning solution. And it took a platform approach. And I had seen many different point solutions that were disconnected from one another. And where I saw the alignment of the go-to-market functions starting to really become a high priority for companies, Anaplan was the choice that I made for a vendor to join because we really eliminate that friction between sales, marketing, customer success, finance, product, and bring together all these different information points from different sources and give people the ability to observe what's happening and make better decisions.
Interesting. You mentioned two words that I think are really big in sales strategy in general, and that's planning, obviously, which is a huge thing, but also the forecasting part. I know you've talked about that before, and also friction in terms of really getting through where you need to get to without these obstacles. Have you seen any commonality, kind of in your experiences over the years, where there's that friction point again that I see in a lot of different areas, or hey, there's that planning gap that I see in a lot of different areas?
Yeah, I would say the common theme, it was an interesting experience going to join Serious Decisions back around 2014. I think part of the interview process was that you had to write a research paper, 1,500 words, on something that you found interesting, present to the executives, and then turn in that research paper, do an executive presentation, and talk about what your observations and findings were. And back then, I saw friction between marketing and sales. And probably the biggest thing that was happening at that point is nobody could agree on what an MQL was or an SQL or any of those really arbitrary things that are pretty meaningless if you ask me. But we couldn't drive synergies between sales and marketing back at that time. And I was working for a company. I actually gave up some operations resources to marketing. I said, here, start a marketing operations group. You can use my headcount, my resources, because I think we should align. The presentation that I gave at Serious Decisions was what I saw as being the aggregation of operations resources across the go-to-market functions from sales to marketing to customer success. I predicted that was going to happen. I called it commercial operations at that time. But one of the highest areas of concentration at Forrester and Serious that I worked on was the rise of revenue operations. And so my initial paper in 2014 was about that. I did a lot of research. I did a lot of evangelizing on that at Serious Decisions. Some of the research I did, there were 347 people, I think, that called themselves revenue operations professional on LinkedIn in 2016. And now there's over 100,000, probably a couple of 100,000 that were happening. So
Wow.
I saw it happening. I knew it was going to happen. I kind of pushed to make it happen. And it was driven out of economics because you go back to planning. You can't afford to have marketing with one plan, sales with another plan, customer success with another plan, segmenting accounts differently, targeting their strategies differently is completely ineffective and inefficient. The vendors in that space were developing solutions that were agnostic of silos. And also a lot of the SaaS companies that were starting to grow at that time were demanding better alignment across the go-to-customer functions because they could now measure engagement after the sale. And the salespeople quickly understood that they'll never sell anything else into that customer unless there's engagement. So it happened quickly. and it continues to happen more quickly now. But it's really one of the areas of obsession that I have is the alignment of those functions.
Well, it's interesting to see the term, smarketing, right? I don't know if HubSpot coined that or, who came out with it. I think HubSpot kinda talked about it a lot, but, the merging of those 2 areas, but like you said, it's happening so quickly, so it's like having the right hand that's in sales, the left hand that's in marketing, and it's like they're just all of a sudden in the room together, and it's like trying to figure that out in terms of no lack of communication, so everyone knows what's going on, everyone's on the same page. So it makes sense what you're talking about in terms of everybody being on the same page, understanding that they're both needed, right? They're both needed parts of everything to make it work.
We it's a matter of fact now that you have a chief revenue officer that's responsible for all these things and a VP of revenue operations. But I was a heretic back in 2015 and 2016 when I was talking about these things, because
Mhm,
I think especially the people in marketing were seeing that as a return to the bad old days where marketing reported into sales and they
mhm,
were going to lose their autonomy and everything that they had gained over those years. I remember I was supposed to present in front of 4,000 people in Austin, and the marketing leader that was supposed to present with me backed out, just couldn't handle it, wouldn't do it. So they had to backfill that
mhm.
person with somebody else. And it
Wow.
turned out it wasn't as scary as everyone thought it was going to be. It actually turned out to be much more positive for marketing. And I'll give
Right.
marketing so much more credit now because they're more numbers driven now, I think, than sales organizations are. They're constantly focused on the investments that they're making, ensuring that those investments are paying off, and that they're actually delivering sales results. And I think
Mhm.
that's a big change before where prior to Marketo and the other marketing automation platforms, we didn't have the ability to measure their influence, and now we do. And they're
Yeah.
even more obsessed about it now than we are with CRM. So I think it's awesome.
What have you noticed in terms of, businesses that you work with staying on the path? Like if you go to the gym, okay, so listen, here's the plan at the gym. You got to do this many sets, you got to do this workout. Takes a little time to see the results, but it seems like in the business and sales world now, even in marketing planning, people have to be very fleet of foot. And it's not like, hey, let's see how this goes for a year, but have to see how it goes for a month and
That's
then
a
see
great
where
point.
we're at, maybe even shorter, right?
Yeah, I think strategy and planning has transformed from being a once a year episodic event
Mhm.
to periodic and really, I would say, dynamic. So you're
Mhm.
always in planning mode.
Yep.
And I'll talk about Anaplan for a second. Is that we create this platform that gives you the ability to plan all the time and to keep it connected.
Mhm.
So that's really what's changed. It's been more than just a once a year event.
Well, feeling connected, that's a term we use a lot here at Dub with sales, where if you don't feel like you're connected to the message, connected to the plan, connected to the actual person you're demoing for, the clients, the follow-up, the whole process. I think the word connected is pretty big because I know with us with video, we're really big on connection with video. But with you and what you're talking about with the planning and building and working with so many different kinds of businesses, there has to be that overall connection or it could fall apart at any point if there's not that holding on to the different areas, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and connected to their vision and what some of their pain points are, and really helping to understand what they do.
Yeah.
I think some of the downside to this constant measurement is we've become very transactional in the way that we have conversations between sellers and buyers.
Mhm.
And with the technology that we have out there, let's just say to surveil every single conversation, either through email or the meetings that you're having, or through the video calls like we're having right now, there's an expectation that something's going to transpire in every conversation.
Right. Right.
So everything is critiqued to the ninth degree,
Mhm.
and I don't view that. I don't view as transactionalizing sales in every level as being
Mhm.
very positive, because now you're not making the investments in the human relationships and developing those relationships as you're progressing through a sales process and building trust. You get off the call and suddenly somebody's reading your transcript and asking you why you didn't do this or why you didn't do it. It's basically why I wouldn't want to be a police officer. They're carrying around
Right.
these webcams, and everybody
Mm.
has the ability to go back and critique every little thing that you did when you were under extreme duress. So somehow we got to find that balance back to humanity and technology.
And I think the again, what we talk about here at Dub with video, humanity is a big thing. Seeing people's faces, hearing the emotion. It's like when you think about SMS messaging. There's only so much you can portray, even with emojis and certain, way you phrase. There's only a certain amount of emotion and meaning you can get from that. If you looked at a transcript with a Zoom meeting or a StreamYard or a podcast like we're doing right now, you don't still get the full picture, because a lot of that interaction, when you watch it instead of reading it, is very different. And it's very different in terms of the connections that are being made, because a lot of the times you may meet with someone 2 or 3 times before the deal is done. And it might have nothing to do in terms of what the product is. It's about building that trust. So that's a huge part of it that we can't lose. And marketing, if they were to read the transcript, okay, they're looking for how can we market this better, looking for that. But the more we learn with these interactions and the more we engage with people, the more information the marketing department has to say, okay, we should think about this. This is what people are really saying and what we're listening to them. It's a huge part of it.
What percentage of communication is nonverbal?
Jeez, yeah. What
It's
percentage
more
is
than
that?
50%. It's a
Yeah,
totally different conversation when you can read
yeah,
people's body language and their facial expressions as you're talking
yeah,
to them. And
yeah.
I do think that video goes a long ways to helping to improve that communication.
It's been a big part of the sales strategy that we've talked to folks over the last couple of years. With you guys at Anaplan, talk a little bit about, and this is where we love the learnings here. So talk about just a little bit what's been your most effective sales strategy in 2024 that you've done this year? What's been that thing that you've implemented that's really kind of shown some results?
So I have a unique role because I'm the sales performance management expert for the
Mhm.
company. So I'm a pseudo seller, and I support the
Yeah.
sales teams in the largest opportunities that they have and some of the biggest prospects. So the single largest or the single most effective strategy that I've used is actually getting out there in person with people when I have something really important to do. Um, we do these Anaplan Connect events throughout the entire world on almost like a monthly basis, and we bring in customers and prospects to
Mhm.
centralized locations, and we have conversations with them through presentations and customer stories. And Anaplan was looking to have one of our most premier customers present at one of these, and it was a difficult conversation to have with them because we were just working out the relationship and getting through some things, and there were a lot of reasons why they didn't want to speak.
Mhm.
And I had some relationships with the team that was out there, and they asked me if I would ask them on our behalf, and I said yes, but only if I fly out. So I'm on the East Coast, and I flew to San Francisco, and I said I need to be able to meet with this person in person. And they said it's a 40-minute conversation. I said, well, it's important that I do it in person. And because I needed to be in the room and have that rapport with them and build that trust and give them my guarantee that certain pieces of the agreement would be accounted for and held up to, and they trusted me. And I just knew it would be a little more difficult for them to say no in person than it would be on a video call
Sure.
because I had invested the time in that relationship. So now I do that a lot. Like if there's something really important to do, if there's a hard conversation or if there's just a really important conversation,
Yeah.
I really try to do it in person as much as I possibly can because I like that personal interaction. It's not to say that video is not important because it really is. It facilitates, it gets things to a certain level, but
Right.
I think salespeople would be best served that they could get back there in front of customers whenever they possibly can, especially coming post COVID when we all got used to doing everything so remotely.
Yeah, we try to have I know we always try to do an omni-channel approach. We try to
Yeah.
cover the bases, and I think if you do that, you're really setting yourself up for success. And if you're leaving any one of those things out, you could be leaving a gap that maybe someone was a little bit more comfortable with, that fit them better. Because along with omni-channel, I mean, it's omni all the time, where you have to reach out. I mean, the touch points for a sales prospect has become more and more and more, just because they might literally miss it. You might have sent them an email, you might have sent them an SMS, you might have posted on their LinkedIn, you might have done this, but they might have just literally missed it. So they've got
Yeah,
to
like
be.
I mean, everything can't be in person. That's really expensive and
Yeah.
inefficient. And the omni-channel piece of it, I think, is really important because now you can have better, more frequent conversations throughout the entire sales process.
Mhm.
I get a chance to talk to a lot of CROs, and over the last year, one of the biggest concerns that they've raised to me in terms of what's happening in sales culture now
Yeah.
is that we're multi-generational, as we've probably always been multi-generational inside of companies,
Yep.
but there's such a distinct difference between the G's and the millennials and Gen Xers like me, and then the boomers. We're dealing with a generation of people who just entered the job market a couple of years ago. You might not have ever met them in person. They
Mhm.
might not have ever been into an office. They don't have the ability that people like me had when I was early in my career to look at the boss's desk at 5 o'clock and see that they're still in their office and just wander in for a conversation.
Sure.
So I'm wondering, how are we going to assimilate these new generations into corporations to help them understand the dynamics of a group like that? They're missing out on that opportunity. I think it'll happen in different ways. I'm sure they're going to outdo us, but it's a concern that people.
And how to recognize that opportunity, like you said, it was easy visually to see, hey, it's 5 o'clock. There's a time to have a chat. There's some open availability. You can physically feel that in front of you, because I'm a Gen Xer as well. So I totally know what you're talking about. And I think the younger generations are going to figure that out, that opportunity, that area where they see an opportunity. Just, it might look a little different than what obviously we've been used to.
Yeah, the casual conversation in the hall is not happening now. And, companies have over-rotated, saying, okay, everyone's coming back to the office. And that doesn't work either. Those people have really high attrition, and that's not working out. So it's I don't have a solution to the problem, but it's a problem that we have to acknowledge.
No, absolutely. The conversation in the hall is more like the conversation in the chat. That's what it is. Like, hey, I just saw you're in the chat. Let me just have a little quick conversation with you. It's pretty much what it's like virtually.
Yeah, I guess so.
Talk to me about, this is my favorite question to ask everybody, because this is one where you take a look at yourself. So what's been the biggest mistake that you feel like you've made kind of over the years? It was like a thing that happened and you're like, you know what? Okay, I realized I made a mistake on that. Like for your own career.
I would say, well, I mentioned that I began my career in the military, and the military is very simple communication, very direct.
Yep. Feelings
don't really take into a lot of account. At least they didn't back in the early 90s when I was doing it. And so you could be pretty upfront and harsh at sometimes with one another, and it was never taken personally. It was just seen as a means of, we've got no time to discuss. We need to make quick decisions, and let's just do this.
Yep.
I brought that attitude into corporate America, and it didn't work. So that was probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made initially. I was young and aggressive and, results focused and task oriented. And I was dealing again with multi-generational people that were older than me, and like, hey, calm down. And then I would say, like, the overriding mistake that I made was just really not taking enough time to understand human nature. And really the psychology of dealing with your fellow human beings, and understanding myself better and understanding other people, and being more sympathetic and empathetic to the importance of those types of conversations. I lacked finesse, I'll say, and it's something that I've really tried to focus on and improve over time. And I think if I'd have known that 25 years ago, I probably would have done a lot better.
Yeah, but you noticed it though. You picked it up. You had the EQ to be there and say, okay, I've realized this. I'm going to take it into account. And then I think that once you realize that, you can apply it, which is what you did. Because sometimes I think it's like reading a sales script. You read the script and you might just go bull straight ahead and just go there, and you're not even listening, reading the room, changing course. You're just putting your head down and doing what you feel is best for your own interest in a way, because you're trying to support yourself, you're in business. But now having the awareness to realize all that and then apply it, that's learning in its best definition.
What really opened my eyes to it was, as a younger guy, and I did this for 18 years. I studied martial arts. I studied Kung Fu. I studied Taoism. I studied under a Taoist master. And one of it was the real deal. And this guy had been trained from the time he was 5 years old, and was probably one of the most famous people in the world in doing what he does. And I think as you start to just study the physical art of confrontation, one of the assumptions that you make is that your opponent is always bigger than you, stronger than you, and faster than you. So you just assume that you're disadvantaged going into anything. So what can you rely on after that is really technique, which could also be considered finesse. So it's understanding the principles of physical combat, and then how to apply those things in any given situation the best way that you possibly can. And not to bore you with it, but like the biggest difference between karate and Kung Fu is that karate, they practice on things called katas, which are just practice movements. You have to anticipate what your opponent's going to do, and then you've got a block number 6, block number 7, block number 8. You have to have perfect calculation of what your opponent's going to do. Much what you just described in a sales conversation. You have a pitch deck. You use your katas, and you say, okay, I'm going to say this, they're going to say that. I'm going to say this, they're going to say that. You have to have perfect planning
Mhm.
And we all know no plan survives first contact with the enemy. Whereas kung fu, it was more about training on principles. So
Got it.
okay, here are the principles that work in any given situation. You have to understand how they move, what their body weight is, how they get grounded.
Mhm.
So I think the big learning for me was train on principles, not on practice motions like the pitch that you had just mentioned. Because like you said, you'll just talk right through the person
Mhm.
and you won't respond and adapt to what they're saying. And you need to be a lot more adaptive and fluid and flexible
Yeah.
than that. So I guess the big difference between the two styles is one is a lot more rigid and planned, and the other one is a lot more fluid and flexible.
And you also have to play the game. You gotta get in the game
Yeah.
because all the theory in the world is great, but when you actually step in there and you're actually experiencing it, it's a whole different thing. Like take basketball. That was my sport growing up. Basketball in college, loved playing. You could learn defensive technique, you could learn shooting, you could learn passing, but the moment you're in that game and someone's right up on you and you've got to make that split decision based on your skills and your practice of what to do and where to go, you can't you can't replicate that without playing. So being in those situations like you've talked about, that's when you're living the real life of sales and marketing and business and everything.
Well, that's the art, right? Like, so you train on all the principles and you've got it all in your muscle memory. The art is combining the right
Mhm.
principles at the right time against the unique opponent that you're dealing with,
Yeah.
and learning and teaching yourself how to overcome that situation as best you possibly can. And then you probably lose in a lot of those situations, but you take that experience and okay, that's how I would do it differently. It's being amorphous, I think, and growing continuously.
That's so true. We're never fully evolved, are we? We never really are.
I don't think so.
we're,
You know,
we're
and this is like I always say it too. Is like, why do I always have to learn everything the hard way? Like, if I'm getting into a new venture and something I've never done before, I'm gonna learn some really hard lessons. But there's only one way to do it. You can listen to other people and it's helpful, but you don't know what to do until you've experienced the pain yourself.
well, like you have I think you have in your LinkedIn. What was the phrase? I think you said the journey is the
Is
result
the
of.
destination? Yeah.
Right, right. There it is right there. I mean, that's like perfect for it. When you hear the word shortcut, it almost in a way, because a lot of people today, I mean, what's the famous word? Hey, what's this hack on how to get the best recipe you want online? Or what's the best way to sell this quickly? A lot of the times we have to take the longer route because it teaches us what we were supposed to be taught.
Yeah, and I implied what you just said was that if I do this hack and then I get this done, then I'm going to arrive at perfection.
Mhm.
You can arrive there for a second, but you don't get to stay there. Like,
No, no,
yeah,
they only let you stay there for a few minutes. Okay, you can get back down the hill now because
that's
yeah,
right. Yeah, you have to continuously maintain what you're doing.
no, that's such a good point. All right, here's the big one. You ready for this one?
Okay.
What's the most important thing you've learned this year?
I mean, there's so many important things that I learned this year. I'll tell you one of the cool things that I did with my wife this year,
Mm,
and that we've learned a lot about is we live up in the state of Maine, and I grew up in Maine. And I don't underappreciate the middle class upbringing that I had, like growing up in a paper mill town. So it was the heyday of America. My father worked in a paper mill. My mother, worked in a shoe store, and every middle class family up there had the opportunity to buy a lakefront camp. We called them camps. So in the summertime, we lived in town, and 5 miles away, we moved on a camp, and I lived on a lake. And it was always my desire and aspiration to move back and live on a lake at some point in time. So my wife and I did that back in 2009 when we bought a place on a lake up in here. And then we had the opportunity to buy another property across the lake from us. And it was a 1960s A-frame. And we said, like, hey, let's buy it. We'll renovate it and we'll put it out there as an Airbnb. And we
mhm.
stay at Airbnbs a lot. But the thing that we both decided to do, our strategy was to not create a rental property, but was try to replicate. And she grew up the same way that I did, middle class, lakes, mountain retreats, things like that, which a middle class family could afford. We want to provide that experience for people to have the way that it's much more expensive now, I'll say, but we were able to provide that week. Like, look, if you get to, I get to spend my entire childhood growing up on a lake. And if you get to do it for a week, I want you to have the ability to experience what we did.
Cool.
So we went into it with that attitude and that idea and marketed it that way and supported it that way. Now we got people coming in from all over the world and getting that 1 week Mainer experience in a rural place that they never would have been able to go to. They all go to the touristy places up in Maine, but now they get authentic Maine. So I guess the most important thing I learned this year was to try to give people an experience or replicate something that you found beautiful and exceptional inside your own experience, and provide that to them. And we're booked out for 3 years because of that, because just the reputation that we've gained and being able to do that. So it was a pretty awesome experience for us. And I think that translates to sales, right? Like if you're selling to somebody, you need to give them an exceptional experience as they're going through the entire process. Even if it's not an exceptional experience and they end up buying from you anyway, they're just not going to be happy.
Right.
You're going to have punish them for doing business with you. And if you're that transactional person, you don't care what happens after the sale, that you're fine. You go somewhere else and do that. But if you're looking to build long-lasting relationships and understanding that person that just bought from you is going to go somewhere else and potentially do it again, you're going to invest in that relationship.
Well, it's all intertwined, because when you mentioned the lake, and I'm picturing the beautiful foliage in Maine, especially around this time of year, and then you picture the experience that someone feels when they go through the proper sales experience, it's that aroma of something you're going to remember and something that is impactful. When they get out of that canoe from the lake and they get back to the cabin, or go back to where they're from, like, wow, that was an experience. And when you do a sales presentation, you have a sales conversation, you want that person walking away and going, you know what, that was great. I'm going to remember that. We talked about that. That was fun. That was interesting. I learned something.
Yeah, the canoe that they're riding in at this place is the one that my father bought for me in 1980. So I've had it for my entire life, and now I get to share it with somebody else.
That's great.
Yeah, so to me, it's kind of an emotional experience, and it really feels incredibly satisfying to be able to do that. My wife loves it, so much so that we bought the place next door, and we're going to do it again.
Oh, that's amazing.
So it's been pretty cool to be able to share that experience with other people, because not everyone was as lucky as we were to be able to grow up this way. We didn't know we were lucky at the time. Like rats, we're up here in rural Maine. We got nobody to hang out with, and we have to stay on this stupid lake. And now people would just kill to be able to do that.
I'll tell you this is one thing I tell everyone out here. So being out in Los Angeles, I've been out here for about 20 years, right?
Yeah.
And I grew up back in Massachusetts, like I was telling you. And even though Los Angeles has some of the most beautiful weather ever, still though, I'll still say this to people out here, they don't believe me. If you go back to New England and they say it's a humid day. See, it's just humid, it's miserable, right? But if you get that thunderstorm that comes in and it clears everything out, that next day after that is some of the most beautiful weather you will ever experience in the world.
And the people that come and stay here from Los Angeles, they look up, wow, stars. They've never seen stars before.
We see stars in the neighborhood, but when we look up, we have to move the clouds out of the way to actually try to, the smog.
Yeah, and plus just a bright light from the city, it dampens the whole thing. They're just experiencing, like they see this nest of lights above them, and they're just blown away.
That's so great. So Dana, before we go, anything that the folks out there, you want to just parting words for everybody in terms of just those sales hungry people? They're working, they're doing their thing, they're sales leaders, they have teams. What's kind of your takeaway for them?
Well, I would say just stick with it. Like I think a lot of people are going through a rough time right now. I just before I got on a call with you, I was speaking to somebody that was laid off like 6 months ago. This person speaks 6 languages. They've got a master's degree. They've worked at some of the most iconic companies you could ever imagine. They've got all the designations and things that you could ever imagine, and they're still struggling to find the next gig. And it's been like that for 6 months. And I just, my heart went out to this guy, because in normal times, the recruiters would all been all over him, So he asked me for some tips on things that he could do to make himself more marketable. And there's not much I could tell him, because he is like, he's just there. And I'm hoping things are going to turn around here in the next few months. And, we'll start to get a more positive attitude and a positive view of what's going to happen economically. I can already kind of feel it changing now. I think it's going in that right direction. It's been a tough year for anyone that's been in sales, a tough couple of years. Yeah. So stick with it. We're going through a cycle, and we'll get through it, and support each other. I would say.
And I think too, Dana, one thing we've experienced at Dub is the personal is the professional now more than maybe ever. I think that we're at a time in the world where, it's more about what your message is and kind of what you bring to the table than is sometimes the message itself. So I think that's an advantage that we have in this technologically driven world where we can kind of have ourselves everywhere all at once, that kind of thing. So.
Yeah, I think, like the focus has been really difficult on sales. Sales cycles are longer. The loss rates are higher. But this is a phase that we're going through right now, and the tenacious people are going to be the ones that come out on top. So we have to kind of dig for each other right now.
Dana, where can people get a hold of you? Just go see you on LinkedIn, or what's a good
Yeah,
spot?
LinkedIn's the best place to get to me. I love to connect with people on there. I do a lot of writing and publishing out there, so I'd love to hear from you.
That's fantastic. Well, Dana, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been a lot of fun. Again, we love having people on that just like yourself can tell stories, can really engage, and I think everyone can take a lot away from it. So thanks so much for joining me today.
Thank you. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Dana. Bye, everybody.
Bye.